A man is lashed to the mast of his own ship, screaming to be set free, while his crew rows past, singing monsters, wax sealed deep in their ears. He is a king, a war hero, the man who brought Troy to its knees. So how did he end up here? Bound, starving, hunted by the sea itself. This is the story of the hardest journey home ever told, and it begins with a fire. For 10 long years, the Greeks battered the walls of Troy, and the walls would not fall. Then one man did what 10 armies could not. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, dreamed up a hollow wooden horse, hid soldiers in its belly, and ended a decade of war in a single burning night. The flames made him a legend. But in the world of Greek myth, cleverness is a debt, and the gods always collect. As 12 ships slipped away from the glowing ruins, sails full of wind and victory, no one aboard could know the truth. The journey home should have taken weeks. It would take 10 years. And of all the men who left Troy that morning, only one would ever see home again. The sea, at first, was generous. It carried them swiftly to Ismaros, land of the Cicones, and there, victory curdled into greed. The crews raided the coast. Wine, plunder, celebration. Odysseus gave one order: take little, leave early. But triumph makes men deaf. They feasted until dawn, and dawn brought the Cicones back, with horses, with spears, with vengeance. 72 men never left that beach. As the survivors pulled at the oars, the sea whispered its first lesson into the wind. It punishes greed. It would not be the last lesson. For 9 days, a storm chased them across the water, as if the sky itself had chosen a side. When it finally let go, they stood on a stranger shore, the land of the Lotus-Eaters. No swords waited there, no walls, only a flower, sweet as forgetting. Whoever tasted it let go of everything, home, family, even their own name, and wished for nothing but to stay, forever. Odysseus dragged his weeping men back to the ships and bound them to the benches. Because he understood something the flower did not. Sometimes the deadliest trap is not pain, it is happiness. The next island looked like mercy, a cave stocked with cheese and fat livestock. A gift, they thought, and made themselves guests. At dusk, the host came home. Polyphemus, a giant with a single eye, and the blood of Poseidon, god of the sea, in his veins. He sealed the entrance with a boulder no army could move, and ate 2 men for dinner. Strength was useless here. So Odysseus built a trap out of nothing but words. He offered the giant strong, unwatered wine, and when the monster demanded his name, he answered softly, "Nobody." That night, they drove a burning stake into the giant's only eye. Polyphemus howled for his brothers, and when they asked who was attacking him, the darkness answered for him, "Nobody! Nobody is killing me!" And so they left him. At dawn, the crew escaped, strapped beneath his sheep, and the plan was perfect, until pride undid it all. From the safety of the waves, Odysseus turned and shouted his true name across the water. The blinded giant lifted his ruined face to the sky and prayed to his father, "Poseidon, curse this man." Far below the surface, the god of the sea heard every word, and slowly, the ocean began to turn against them. And yet the curse began gently, almost kindly. The winds carried them to the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of the storms, who pitied the wanderers. His gift was a leather bag holding every wind on earth, leaving free only one soft western breeze, the breath that leads to Ithaca. For 9 days and nights, Odysseus held the sail rope himself, refusing sleep. On the 10th, with the fires of home flickering on the horizon, exhaustion finally won. And as their king slept, the crew stared at the mysterious bag and saw gold. They opened it. Every storm on earth burst free in a single scream and hurled them all the way back across the sea. This time, Aeolus shut his door. "You are cursed by the gods, and I do not help the cursed." Darker waters followed, the land of the Laestrygonians, giants tall as cliffs, who rained boulders onto the fleet. 11 ships were crushed in the harbor like shells beneath a heel. One escaped into open water. Only one. That last ship found the island of Aiaia, and on it, Circe, a sorceress with a voice like honey and a wand like fate. She welcomed the scouting party with a feast, then touched their shoulders and turned them into pigs. Odysseus walked into her palace carrying a strange herb pressed into his hand by the god Hermes, and her magic broke against him like a wave against stone. Astonished, Circe restored his men, and the island softened around them. They stayed a year, feasting, resting, almost forgetting. And when at last they asked her for the road home, her answer turned the fire cold. "There is no road home until you speak with the dead." So they sailed to the edge of the world, to a shore where the sun has never risen, where fog lies on the water like a held breath. There they poured blood into a pit, and the dead came drifting through the mist. First rose the blind prophet Tiresias, carrying a map made of warnings. You will pass monsters that sing, a whirlpool that drinks the sea, a beast with 6 heads. You may survive them all. But touch the sacred cattle of the sun, and every man dies. And then came a shade Odysseus never expected to see. His own mother. She had died of grief. Waiting for a son the sea refused to give back. 3 times he reached out to hold her. 3 times his arms closed on cold, empty mist. The man who had outwitted a giant wept alone at the border of death. Then he dried his eyes, turned his ship around, and sailed straight into everything the prophet had warned him about. The Sirens found them first. Their song, old sailors said, could unlock a man's heart and steer his ship lovingly onto the rocks. Odysseus sealed his crew's ears with softened beeswax. Then he gave the strangest order of the voyage, tie me to the mast, and no matter how I beg, do not release me. He wanted to hear the song no man had ever survived. When the voices rose out of the mist, sweet, ancient, and knowing, he screamed and fought until the ropes cut into his flesh. His deaf crew only rowed harder, and slowly, the song faded behind the stern, like a dream at sunrise. He remains, in all of myth, the only man who heard it, and lived. But the sea offered no rest, only a choice. Ahead lay a strait with no good side. On one side churned Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallowed the sea itself, 3 times a day. On the other, in a cave above the waves, waited Scylla, 6 heads on serpent necks, each with a triple row of teeth. No ship passed without paying. Odysseus chose the monster over the abyss. As the ship hugged the cliff, 6 heads struck like lightning, and 6 men were gone into the dark. It was the cruelest arithmetic of the voyage. Lose 6, or lose them all. Battered, starving, and grieving, they dragged themselves ashore on Thrinacia, the island of the sun, God's sacred cattle. The one place on earth Tiresias had begged them never to touch. For a full month, the storms refused to break, as if the sky itself were setting a trap. The food ran out. Hunger sharpened into madness. And one night, while Odysseus slept, his starving men fell upon the sacred herd. The moment their sails caught wind again, Zeus answered, with a single thunderbolt. The ship burst apart like a handful of kindling. The sea took every last man, and Odysseus alone clung to the wreckage, drifting beneath an empty sky for 9 days. On the 10th, the waves laid him, half drowned, on the shore of the nymph Calypso. She nursed him back to life, and then refused to let that life leave. For 7 years, she kept him on her island of endless spring, offering the one gift no mortal is supposed to refuse, immortality. Stay with me, and never die. And Odysseus said no. Every day he sat alone at the water's edge, staring at the horizon, weeping for a rocky little island, and a mortal woman growing old without him. At last, the gods themselves grew restless. Calypso, heartbroken, placed an axe in his hands, and he built a raft, trading eternity for home. The sea claimed one final toll. A last storm splintered the raft and threw him, naked and half dead, onto the shore of the Phaeacians. Their king listened to his impossible story through the night, and at dawn gave him one last ship. And so, 20 years after sailing for Troy, Odysseus opened his eyes on a familiar beach, Ithaca, home. But his war was not over. For his palace no longer knew its king. 108 suitors had moved into his halls, feasting on his wealth, pressing his wife Penelope to declare him dead and choose one of them. So the goddess Athena wrapped the king in a beggar's rags, and Odysseus walked unrecognized through his own home, counting every insult in silence. There he found Penelope's last act of resistance. A contest. Whoever could string the great bow of Odysseus and send an arrow through the rings of 12 axe heads would take her hand. One by one, the strongest men of Ithaca strained until their arms shook and failed to even bend it. Then the beggar asked for a turn, and the hall laughed. He took the bow and strung it the way a man greets an old friend. The arrow sang through all 12 rings. And then, slowly, he turned the bow toward the suitors. By nightfall, his son fighting at his side, the hall belonged to its king again. Only Penelope still doubted. 20 years of waiting teaches a heart to guard its own door. So she set one final trap, ordering their marriage bed carried out of its chamber. And Odysseus's flash of anger revealed the secret only her true husband could know. He had built that bed himself, carved around a living olive tree still rooted in the earth. It could never be moved. And in the end, neither could she. 20 years of waiting dissolved in a single embrace. 10 years of war. 10 years of sea. Monsters, storms, witches, and the silent dead. And in the end, what carried him home was never strength. It was cunning, stubbornness, and a rocky little island worth more than immortality. If this voyage moved you, The channel is full of stories history still can't explain. Subscribe. The next journey is already being charted.